My mom and dad have really good friends the next town over, in Fort Davis. Our friends live in an old house, built on top of Civil War camps. I was over for the evening. I was going to help them work cattle the next day. I was all alone in the house, so imagine my surprise when I hear someone walking up the steps. Only when I got there wasn't anyone on them. I went through the house and didn't find anyone. I got spooked, so I locked my door and got my .22 pistol by the bed. I eventually dozed off, only to wake up in the middle of the night. I could hear footsteps on the stairs again. I grabbed my pistol and headed to the stairs, and I feel the hairs on my entire body stand on end. I remember a super cold chill hit me. It was so cold, it took my breath away. I freaked out and ran to the guest house. Didn't go back to sleep. When I told them about it the next day, they all laughed. Not because they didn't believe me, but because everyone says they see a soldier on the stairs. Never stayed the night in that house again. Been over plenty of times, but I'll never sleep there as long as I live. When I was a student, the campus was located on what had only 20 years before been an old asylum for the insane. They did lobotomies there and whatnot. Most of the buildings had been refurbished into normal school buildings with lecture halls, study group rooms, etc. Seemed pretty normal, except the small study group rooms that only had one window, that was 1 square foot, 15 feet up on the wall, with bars in front of it. Yeah, now, walking around the halls at night was creepy enough in itself. But one experience I will never forget. I was the leader of a student-professor team that was in charge of evaluating lectures, professors, timetables, etc. And we usually had our meetings after hours. This one time, we were sat in what used to be the old employee cafeteria. According to one of the old professors who had been around for a long time. Now, I had seen the original blueprints from back when it was an asylum, so I knew what buildings had been the women's cell wing, the men's wing, administration including morgue, etc. A little while into the meeting, suddenly all of us, 8 people in total, turn at the same time. Everybody hearing what seemed like a woman's scream, coming from an open window towards the old women's wing. We all knew we were the only ones at the campus at the time, and we had all heard it, as evidenced by the fact that everyone turned their head. The summer before I went off to college, I was sitting at home after work, watching House Hunters as one does. My mom and sister were supposed to be coming home any minute. Then I heard the back door open, clear as day. The same creaks in the hinges that happen every time. I hear footsteps. Heavy ones too, like Andre the Giant was stomping through my house. They come through the kitchen and down the hallway towards where I'm sitting. I call out, thinking it's my mom and sister. But I'm still the only one there. Then, like a blanket being wrapped around me, I feel a super strange sensation. I can best describe it as static. It felt like I was in a sleeping bag, one of those super fancy ones with the hoods, charged with static electricity. Then, as soon as it came over me, the feeling left. Flash forward to last April, when I'm at the end of my sophomore year of college, I'm in my apartment hanging out with some friends. Then I feel the same sleeping bag of static. It comes over me like a huge wave, and I see a shadowy figure of a large man come around the corner and just stand there. I can feel him staring at me. Then I hear a breathy voice in my ear say, "You." Next thing I remember is talking with a friend of mine an hour or so later. She says I'd been acting weird, like I was in a trance or something. I was a police officer who had a talent for talking violent and emotionally disturbed people down and diffusing situations. We had a bad lady named Annie, who we would get calls on regularly, shoplifting, disturbing the peace, etc. Depending on her mood, she would sometimes fight officers trying to arrest her. No one wanted to hurt her, so taking her into custody could be an ordeal. Also, Annie didn't bathe regularly, but she compensated by applying generous amounts of Stetson aftershave. It would make your eyes water and would stay in your car for hours. The first time I had to arrest her, I talked to her in my Fraser Crane voice, and it went pretty smoothly. On the way to the jail, I asked Annie if she'd eaten. When she said no, I stopped and got her a 2-piece chicken meal with biscuit. I then drove slowly to the jail so she could eat them. From then on, when she'd get in trouble, she'd request me to take her to jail. Fast forward, I've been promoted to sergeant. My marked cruiser number 61 was parked in the motor pool lot to be reissued. Later that afternoon, I responded to a fatal accident that one of my guys was working. It was Annie. She had been run over by a truck and killed. I was pretty upset. I should have been around to keep this from happening. Later that night, a deputy from the sheriff's office called in and said someone was hiding in one of our cruisers in the back lot. I was heading in to do paperwork and got there first. The deputy told me via radio what car it was. It was number 61. I went to the car and saw no one in it. Another officer brought a key, and we unlocked it to check for any damage. When I opened it up, the first thing I smelled was Stetson aftershave. My house has relatively bizarre things happening all the time, like whistling coming from the landing when no one is home and it's not a windy day, or footsteps in the attic, but never anything that genuinely terrified me. I had just come back from a long weekend away and was absolutely exhausted and incredibly hungover. I think that is probably the reason I experienced sleep paralysis that night. Anyway, I woke up in my sleep, obviously still asleep, and looked over to the corner of my room to see a woman in a gray and black gown with hollowed out, blackened eyes staring at me in my sleep. She was dressed in the Georgian-era clothes, which was the era my house was built in. Once I saw her, she pointed her finger at me and gave me a sort of come here motion with her finger. After a few seconds, she lunged towards me with her hands out, as if she was about to strangle me. And then I woke up. Safe to say, I didn't sleep very well for the rest of the week. Still, the creepiest thing to happen to me yet. I invited my new girlfriend to stay the night at my house. It wasn't the first time, and she normally sleeps on the side of my bed next to the wall. She never revealed to me her special sleeping conditions beforehand. Music on low or white noise, and possibly a small light. So it was pitch black and silent as the dickens. She wanted to try sleeping on the other part of the bed. She falls asleep like a light turning off. 2 seconds and she's out. I don't fall asleep quite as easily, so I'm holding her as she's facing me, and I feel a bit uncomfortable. So I try to put my leg on top of hers. As soon as my leg touches hers, she wakes up, looking upward and exclaims, "Whoa!" I look in the same direction, not seeing anything, and at that point, she hides under the blankets. This freaks me out, so I do the same. I shake her and ask her if she's awake and what's going on. She tells me there's a large, dark figure standing over her, like bent over at a 90-degree angle, staring at her. She can't really make out any facial features, except she told me later she could see his mad eyes. I'm thoroughly scared now, and I remember from watching ghost hunting shows that you have to command them to go away. So, in my bravest possible voice, I say, "You are not allowed here. You have to leave," without ever removing the blanket from my face. I asked her if it worked, and she decided to check, and she said he was gone. I jumped over her and switched on the light as fast as I could, and we spent the night looking up relaxing videos to calm nerves. She tells me later that she can see people like this all the time, even at work in crowded, lit-up places. She doesn't get scared of them there. She just pretends they are real people. I work in an old building. It used to be a World War hospital. Coworkers had told me how they thought it was haunted, but I never believed those kind of things. It was winter, so it was dark out by the late afternoon. I was walking down a long corridor alone, and I remember thinking it was really cold, even with the heating being on for the whole day. I heard footsteps. It sounded like a woman, heels on stone flooring. The footsteps were coming from behind me, but they got louder as if the woman picked up her pace. The flooring might have been stone, when the building was a hospital, but I was walking on very thick carpet. The carpet being so thick, it was a struggle to push the trolley on it. I got back to some colleagues and told them about it, and they said, "Yeah, we've heard her before. We believe there's a nurse from the hospital walking the corridors." It was creepy, and after that, I didn't walk the corridor alone, and during my time working there, not a lot of people did. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, I woke up to a noise in my room. When I opened my eyes, there was a man standing in front of me with a big brown beard, dark hair, and black clothes. I kept looking at him in fear and backed away on my bed until I was up against the wall. Then I felt the mattress sink down beside me, and I started to cry. When I looked again, he had vanished, but it still seemed as if there was someone lying next to me on the bed. I asked it to leave because I was afraid, and the bed returned to normal. I cried myself to sleep, and still remember the man's face to this day. I never met anyone who looked like that, and neither had my parents. When I was a kid, we moved into a 120-year-old home. It was always eerie, and to this day, I avoid it at all costs. I hate the place. Creeps me out. During one of our first nights there, about 1998, I awoke to my brother screaming that a ghost was in his room. He said it was a little boy who was looking for his marbles. About 6 months later, while renovating, my mother found marbles and other toys hidden in the kitchen walls. My great-grandpa told me this one. One time when he was younger, he went to go visit some friends and their daughter. He arrives on a horse. He was a rancher in Texas. The little girl walks up to him and says, "Hi, Paul. I'll take your horse. Dinner is ready. You can go in and sit down." So he walks inside and sits at the table. The parents walk up to him and say, "Who let you in?" He says, "Your daughter took my horse. She said I could come in." They looked horrified. She'd been dead for 6 months. Not me, but my dad. When he was younger, he used to see a woman in a white nightdress holding a candelabra walking down the hallway at his old house. No one ever believed him, but he thought it was his grandmother. Fast forward 20 years, and he's talking to someone that he works with. This girl says she used to see a woman in a white nightdress holding a candelabra in her old house. My dad asked where she used to live, and it was his old house. Spooky. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, my mother worked nights, and we shared a double bed. One day, I felt a strange presence in the bedroom. I had my eyes closed, and when I opened them, I saw hands wrapped around the bed from underneath. The hands were made of blood, bone, and hanging skin, and they tried to climb up the bed. I turned away, and there was a white shadow lying next to me. I managed, after a long time, to get up and run to my grandmother's room. She didn't dare come back to the bedroom with me. Hey everyone, Dismal Hero here. Thanks for checking out the video, and if you like what you saw, make sure to subscribe so you're always up to date with my new videos. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.